Heartache to heartache we stand. No promises, no demands. Love is a battlefield. Excuse me. We are strong. No one can tell us we're wrong. Searching our hearts for so long. Both of us knowing love is a battlefield. You're begging me to go. You're making me stay. Why do you hurt me so bad? God, my voice sounds terrible today. I sound like Fran Drescher. Oh, God. I have such a gravelly, raspy voice now. And it's all from bad habits. We'll give people another couple minutes to get here. But we're going to have a little chat today about Theosophy. I did straighten my hair this morning. I did, Bexy. This is the first time I've straightened my hair since before you and I started dating. This is the first time I've straightened my hair since May. And the reason I did is because I was letting my hair dry and curl. And I pulled it kind of straight in front because it was starting to get frizzy. And then it turned into this whole thing, you know? So I ended up straightening it. Hello, Diasporama. Good to see you. Yeah, we're going to talk about a little bit about Madame Blavatsky before we do your live charts. Yay, Rory. My brother Rory's here to moderate. Wonderful. Please tell your homies about me on Twitch because, you know, try to make this a thing. And on Twitch, I get sort of like younger viewers and stuff, you know? So, this is your favorite shirt, Bexy? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I should probably, do a picture of Madame B, Madame Blavatsky, that doesn't necessarily have all the web stuff. All the web stuff. I got a notification on Twitch. Yay! Thank you for telling me, Quantum. Thank you for telling me. Plus, we'll talk about some other astrology shit. We're here for a while. I did 3 whole hours last time, so maybe we'll do that again. Because we want to get to everyone's chart readings. But we also want to talk about Madame B. We want to talk about Madame Blavatsky. She smoked like 2 pounds of tobacco a day and cigars. I mean, that's the rumor. I heard that also on Behind the Bastards. Of course, Behind the Bastards is a wonderful podcast, and you can see them on YouTube. But they do a wonderful episode on Madame B. So, there's Madame B. And we'll just launch right into it. Well, anyway. Is there a better screen to put this shit on? Chat box, maybe. I'm still learning Streamlabs. Or at least learning how to be more adept with it, I suppose. You know. Madam B. Madam B. Let me turn Caleb's chart off. Hello, Erica. Nice to see you. So, just so everyone knows, please like this stream if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. I prioritize donations and members of my channel in terms of live readings. But I also get to our Twitch friends as well. So, and if you're on Twitch, please follow. But I already know the people watching on Twitch right now have already followed. So, but yes, please, and consider becoming a member of my YouTube channel because we do live astrology classes too. And when you When you join, you get access to all the classes that I did, and you get access to all the replays of the live streams. So, why do I have this woman up here? Who is this with those crazy eyes, right? Can always sort of tell someone by their eyes a little bit. This woman is known as Madame Blavatsky, or HPB, right? Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And who was she? Well, you may not know this, but she's one of the biggest influences on modern Western spirituality in history. She is the mother of the New Age, Diasporama. The name of my YouTube channel is SS Saturn Girl. So, like, I don't know if you heard of Sniper Wolf, right? With 3 S's. Sniper Wolf. Thank you, Rory. Yeah, I did 2 S's because Saturn Girl wasn't available. You know, and I thought, well, super sexy Saturn Girl. You know. So, yeah, please. Please, please, please. I gotta put all my socials on the YouTube thing. But anyway, this woman is so important, and yet so many people have no clue who she was, and yet they still practice a lot of what she preached. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And what people also don't know, especially astrologers, at least most modern and baby astrologers, is that she was a primary influence on modern astrology. And we'll talk about why that is in just a second too. But I just want to give a little background on her. Number one, she started what was called the Theosophical Society and is still around today. In fact, I have been involved in theosophical teaching in some form or another for 20 years. Now I'm a big, now I reject it largely, and I talk a lot of crap about it. But you have to understand how important Theosophy was to the foundation of modern astrology. And a big reason of why that was is because modern astrologers, or at least after the into the 19th century, out of the 18th century, that is the 1700s into the 1800s, they didn't have access to the same ancient texts that we do now. And very few of these ancient texts, even the ones that we had, say at the Royal British Museum, you know, a lot of these texts had never been translated, right? The Hermes texts, right? And other, Vedius Valens. A lot of these ancient astrologers, Paulus and Alexandrinus, Firmicus Maternus, right? A lot of these people hadn't been translated until the 1980s. And so we really got an in-depth, rich look at what ancient astrology really was. We got that in the 1980s and 90s with Project Hindsight, right? Which was a group of astrologers analyzing these ancient texts. And out of that came our modern notions and awareness of Hellenistic or ancient astrology. And those, right, ancient astrology is largely founded upon Hermeticism, as we spoke about last time. And the interesting thing about Theosophy is that itself was erected upon misunderstandings or misrepresentations of these ancient philosophies, including the Vedic philosophy. Whatever you've got going on totally makes you look young as fuck. Oh, thank you. I'm 41 years old. I'm old AF, you know? My neckwear is gorgeous. This is sort of my kink thing, you know? I love this. It's my dog chain. I gotta wear this more often, just, you know? So, Misha, I see, is here. I'm pretty sure your name is Misha. Ma'am, who is she? She's Madame Blavatsky, and she had a big, big influence on the whole country of India and Indian philosophy, right? Now, I don't want to take the position of colonizer or anything like that, but she did represent the colonization of Eastern philosophy in many ways, especially Indian philosophy. And this has a lot to do with Vedic astrology as well, because guess what? She had a large, large influence on Vedic astrology, and not in a good way. You look like the maximum of a 28-year-old. Thank you. Thank you. I did an adult live stream last night, and people thought I was 27. I'm like, oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So Madame Blavatsky was born Helena Petrovna von Hahn, right? The HPB stands for Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was Russian born. The von Hahn part indicated that she was aristocracy. So she did come from aristocratic roots. Her dad was sort of a very important military official, and her mom actually was a prolific writer who passed away very early on, unfortunately. But Blavatsky herself, we'll call her HPB, she went to live with, I believe it was her grandparents in a wonderful estate, right? And she sort of had a reputation for being a creepy kid. You know, one person I heard compare her to Wednesday Addams, right? Like on the show Wednesday. She claimed to be hearing voices all the time, to be communing with spirits. Her grandparents' estate had all these little tunnels and stuff around, you know? And she would hide in there, and servants would find her communing with the dead. And her grandfather reportedly had this amazing library, right, full of occult books, masonry, Freemasonic books, Rosicrucian books, and all this sort of stuff, right? And a lot of this quote-unquote Western spirituality and occult lore was relatively new, and also came from sort of a, you could say, a misunderstanding of older philosophies, right? And we won't get into a lot of that right now. That's an episode for another time. But suffice it to say that Madame Blavatsky, HPB, little Blavatsky, had a very active imagination. And if she only stayed to writing fiction like her mother, she may have not had the influence that she did. Mostly not very good. But she represented the old version of that grind set mindset. The girl boss, you know, the girl boss. Slay, darling, slay, you know. And that's what she sort of represented. So she already had this proclivity. And when she was a child, right, she went to this sort of diplomatic meeting between, between a Buddhist tribe in the Gobi Desert. You know, they were nomadic, they moved around. And, you know, her own envoy, right, who she was with. I believe it was with her father. And that made a big impression on her. That was an actual provable liaison she had with actual Eastern philosophies and these Buddhist characters, you see, out in the Gobi Desert. So this sort of began her fascination with Eastern culture and Eastern philosophies. Yeah. So later she would marry this dude, right? This old toad named Blavatsky. I forget his first name. But she married him, little Helena Petrovna von Hahn. I believe she was quite young too, you know, late teens, early 20s. And she couldn't stand the idea. She didn't want to be married. She didn't want to be contained or tied down, right? So she escaped, right? She left her marriage. And there's various sort of fantastic stories of her being shipwrecked several times and sort of being one of the lone survivors, yeah? And escaping the tyranny of marriage, right? Now, she also claimed to have been in communication with what she called ascended masters, or sort of what became part of the spiritual esoteric lore. Let me see what the chat is saying. I'm a little weak in history. That's why we're talking about it, sweetheart. And you, as an Indian national, should be aware of some of it. Because in India right now, with Narendra Modi and the Hindu nationalist movement, a lot of this history is sort of shunned, right? Because there's a big Hindu nationalist movement and very anti-Muslim. You see, and I'm not trying to get into Indian politics right now, but there's a lot of awful stuff going on in India right now. A lot of far right nationalist type of politics, sort of like we're seeing worldwide in the US. Anyway, but that's besides the point. And some of that is a reaction to the colonial past as well, which Blavatsky sort of represents to a certain extent. But we'll get to that again in just a minute. This is all important stuff, and we'll get to your charts. So please put your birth information in the comments, in the chat. Anyway. So Blavatsky escapes marriage, right? And she meets what she calls ascended masters. The first one, Master Moria, who factors in heavily into all the spiritual lore that came after, and Master Kuthumi, or KH, right? And she claims that she was able to travel to Tibet and live there for several years, learning from these masters, right? Which is probably not true, because no one could have made it in Tibet around that time. She was born, let me double check. I can't remember when she was born. It was the early 1800s, though. It was the early 1800s. Okay. I know she's a Leo rising, I think. She was born, in August of 1831, right? So around the time the whole spiritualism thing started to take on, right? Or started to emerge, right? And what's interesting about spiritualism is it represented a revival, in some respects, of old philosophies and occultism in America, in the US. Even President Abraham Lincoln was famously involved in spiritualism along with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. They lost their son. What was his name? I think it was Todd. They lost their son, right? Probably to a disease. Well, we don't need to get into what killed their child, but suffice it to say that Mary Todd Lincoln spent a lot of money and time with seances trying to commune with her dead child. Now, the spiritualism movement sort of took off, I believe, in the 1830s and 40s, right, in upstate New York, if I'm not mistaken. But really got big when, excuse me, around the 1850s and 1860s. Yeah. So Blavatsky, though, claimed to have studied in Tibet, which is probably not true, right? If you were trying to enter Tibet, in the 1850s or 1860s, you would have been killed. So the only people they let into Tibet at the time were some British diplomatic envoys, but that was it. And don't worry, diaspora, we'll get to you. But anyway, after all that, Blavatsky came to the United States in her 40s, right? And she got involved in the whole spiritualist thing, right? Leading seances. Some of her biographies sort of expose some grifts, if you will. She used to have little fake props or whatever, like a little white glove full of cotton balls that would come out like a ghost hand. And she was able to fool some people. but mostly she didn't, mostly, I stumble over my words, little speech impediment. She mostly did not fool people. It was a grift. And she actually sort of became anti-spiritualist. She began to take the position not of passive mediums, which she called people who were just sort of instruments of other beings, and what she called active mediums, people who actually controlled and wielded the forces of nature and could make ghosts and demons do whatever they want. And this would eventually become known as magicians, right? Also in the 1830s, a famous occultist, Eliphas Levi, was reviving some of the Western occult ideas, right? And again, largely coming from Hermeticism. The whole idea of initiation and going through progressive spiritual development in order to gain divine wisdom and reunite with your source, which are the core tenets of Hermeticism. But what Blavatsky did is sort of half-ass, right, her understanding of these things, and then represent them in her own sort of flavor, which took on the flavor of colonialism, right, and European sort of supremacy. So while in the United States, Helena Blavatsky meets a man named Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, right, who was a colonel during the Civil War, right? So this is like the late 1860s, I'm pretty sure. She meets Colonel Olcott, and basically he leaves his whole family because he's infatuated with this woman and her supposed occult powers, right? She did have one occult power. She was able to smoke a shitload of tobacco. The rumors were that she smoked a pound to 2 pounds a day, which I don't think is humanly possible, but suffice it to say that she smoked a lot of tobacco, right? Excuse me. But she meets this guy, Olcott, and he becomes inspired and infatuated with her sort of spiritual teaching and her so-called ability to commune with these ascended masters. What's an ascended master? The idea is that an ascended master was once a human who achieved divine wisdom and then hangs out trying to help other humans achieve the same fucking wisdom, right? So this whole lore sort of erupted around her. And she had all kinds of crazy stories and rumors about her, you know, visiting these ancient hidden caves, visiting ancient cities in South America, right? Meeting other beings, disembodied beings and the like, right? So anyway, Olcott was fascinated by her ability to commune with these masters. And she even, well, she probably grifted him a little bit too. She would send him like these letters written by the supposed masters. And he was so infatuated that he, of course, took them to be true. In fact, some of these letters were sent to a British journalist named Alfred Percy Sinnett, AP Sinnett. And they became known as the Mahatma letters. And these became a foundational document or teaching in what would become her organization, Theosophy, the Theosophical Society, right? Prior to that, she was having these elaborate meetings, right, with the intelligentsia of New York, right, who also were racist and Victorian, you know. And they would study sort of occult things or whatever. It was like a reading group, and they would bring in people who were supposedly, you know, psychic or magicians or something. And Olcott had the idea of, hey, let's start a society, right? Let's start a society. So they did, the Theosophical Society. And the idea was that it bridged the teachings of the East and the West. Now, what was insidious about it was that she took a misunderstanding of Indian culture, of Vedic culture, of Buddhism, and of ancient philosophies like Platonism and Hermeticism. And she crammed them all together, right? And Jewish philosophy, of course. Kabbalah, right? And Kabbalah itself was also erected upon Platonism and Hermeticism, not just Jewish thought or theology. It was heavily influenced by the mystical traditions which largely came in the West from Plato. She even wrote a book on, or a very small treatise on Neoplatonism, right? Which was very interesting, but didn't really, represent the philosophy very well. And then she wrote, this is my favorite thing she wrote. It's called The Voice of the Silence. You should read it. It's very beautifully written, and it is very mystical, and it does sort of evoke and inspire certain, aspiration. And I guess you could call it spiritual aspirations in it, you see. You really should read The Voice of the Silence. Very, very good. And it's for free online. You can read it for free, Type in Madame Blavatsky, Voice of the Silence. This was supposed to be a representation of Buddhism, right? And what she called esoteric Buddhism. Really, it was a misrepresentation of Buddhism because she tried to imbue it with certain theological assumptions, right? Buddhism doesn't take God to be a thing, nor the soul, except in some traditions like Vajrayana and other stuff. But she ignored all of that and attributed all sorts of other stuff to Buddhism, you see. And she would eventually write this major work, her major tome known as The Secret Doctrine, right? The Secret Doctrine was sort of an exposition on all of her occult philosophy, right? This amalgam of Eastern and Western philosophy shoved together and disparately tied together through other nonsense. One of her big influences was a writer named Edward Bulwer Lytton, who wrote a book called The Coming Race, right? Which was very racist Victorian nonsense. Sort of illustrated some Victorian race science. In fact, her mother translated some of these works. And Blavatsky herself incorporated some of the basic ideas into her philosophy. The idea of races, right? Root races, sub-races, branch races. We won't get into all of that. But suffice it to say, she divided the main ones up into Lemurian, right? Atlantean, and Aryan. And you see, these ideas would go on to inspire high-level Nazis like Heinrich Himmler. Now, Hitler wasn't exactly interested in Theosophy, but some of his inner circle was. With ideas like Atlantis, right? And again, fetishizing Tibet and these ascended masters. There were Nazi expeditions to go find these masters and to enter Tibet, right? To look for Atlantis, or at least the remains of it. And a lot of this was just repackaged Victorian race science, right? There had to be an Atlantis because indigenous people couldn't have done, couldn't have built monuments and all these things. It had to be some mystical, magical white people, So anyway, this idea sort of pervaded all of this nonsense. And then, aside from all that within the Secret Doctrine, was a lot of what's called the occult history of humanity, which can't be proven or disproven, but a lot of it is demonstrably false at this point. Like, she claimed the pyramids were 70,000 years old, which, no, they're about 3,000 years old, right? And we know that because we can carbon date the mortar between the stones, right? Now, the influence the Theosophical Society had is undeniable. Now, firstly, I want to talk a little bit about the influence it had on astrology, because Blavatsky brought in these ideas, right, about astrology. But you see, during the 19th century, they didn't have a lot of knowledge about the origin of these things, really. So she made it up. And then you had a theosophist named Alan Leo, right, who was sort of the granddaddy of modern astrology. And he was a pretty big follower of Blavatsky, right? He became a high-level person in the Theosophical Society. Now, one thing I missed is that the Theosophical Society was began or founded in 1875. And the headquarters of it were moved to India, right? Once again, because they fetishized India and the wisdom or the occult wisdom of India, and what they knew as sort of the birth of the Aryans, right, which supposedly happened in India, which, you know, it isn't true. This isn't a thing. You know, this is not a thing, right? They made this shit up, you know. But they had their headquarters in India, and Alan Leo, this famous astrologer, was one of the high-level members or heads of that headquarters in India. And he brought a lot of modern stupid ideas about astrology to India. Now, among those ideas was the 12-letter alphabet, right, that houses got their meanings from the signs, which we know isn't true, especially if you've been following me for a while, but we won't go into that. And then he brought the modern planets, of course, and lots of modern significations for things. So you see, a lot of this stuff ended up negatively influencing Indian philosophy, or rather astrological philosophy. And you can watch Vedic astrologers on YouTube now still using a lot of this bullshit, right? In fact, Vedic astrology was a lot closer to ancient astrology, with a few exceptions, you see? Now, there were other significant influences on Indian culture, especially for you, Manisha, to be aware of. The Sphinx is way older than previously thought. You got to tell me what you mean by way older. And you got to show me some peer-reviewed science, because so many interesting claims are made about all these things. I recently watched, one of my heroes is an ancient historian, a legit academic named Dr. David Miano. And he did a YouTube thing about the Sphinx. And I wish I could remember. Let's see. I mean, there's a thing about the whole climate change theory. You got to watch Dr. David Miano on it. That, you know, the water damage to the Sphinx indicates that it may be older. Conventional wisdom says it was around 2500 BCE. And this is based on archaeological evidence, right? Including the Sphinx's location in Khafre's pyramid complex, and similarity, and the similarity of the Sphinx Temple's center court to Khafre's mortuary temple. So I know interesting claims are made, Quantum, but you have to verify them, because a lot of the claims are made oftentimes by people who aren't scientists and people who are, you know, into ancient aliens nonsense. But we can follow up on that. But suffice it to say that regardless, there was a big fetishization of Egypt, even in the ancient world, which we talked about last time, right? With Hermeticism. But anyway, she also had an undeniable influence on Indian culture, in that Theosophy was a big driver of Indian independence. At least that's according to Mahatma Gandhi, who was also known as Mohandas Gandhi. Now, it wasn't Blavatsky that directly influenced Gandhi. It was her successor, Annie Besant, or Annie Besant. And she was a British theosophist. She was originally a socialist, a women's rights activist who fought for women to have the vote in England. You see, she was a suffragette. And she was very influential. She even was anti-imperialist, even though she herself occupied, a place in that whole imperialist milieu. She greatly influenced Gandhi, though, according to him. You see, he was a British lawyer of Indian descent, of course. He'd never read the Bhagavad Gita, which is a foundational text in Vedic philosophy. It's part of what's called the Mahabharata or Mahabharata. I'm saying the English version of these words, So you see, these were foundational documents in Vedic philosophy. And Gandhi credited Annie Besant with actually getting him to read the Bhagavad Gita, you see. And he credited her with being a driving impetus behind Indian independence. And of course, we know, those of us even vaguely familiar with history probably know that Gandhi was sort of the lead figure or the head figure of the Indian independence movement and sort of practiced this whole nonviolent resistance thing, which then in turn influenced Martin Luther King Jr., right? In many ways. So you see, Theosophy had a large influence on the Western world. The problem is, though, is that it brought a lot of these dated, racist, Victorian ideas and codified them in its philosophy and justified them in so many ways. You see, one of the beliefs of Theosophy is that apes, right? Anthropoids, that is like gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, that all these anthropoid creatures or apes came from humans breeding with animals, that they didn't exist before humans, which is a bunch of nonsense. And we know that demonstrably, right? From the genetic record. We can look at mitochondrial DNA and see that's not the case, right? So a lot of that shit was made up. And then once again, misrepresenting other philosophies, right? Vedic philosophy, Buddhism, all these things. And she rationalized that with, well, modern Indians and modern Buddhists don't know what they're talking about. This is esoteric philosophy. This was the hidden side, right? And she was able to make all kinds of fantastic claims. For example, the Akashic record, right? The word Akasha is a Sanskrit word. However, the Akashic record is not an Indian or Vedic concept or idea. Akasha, or this root word comes from kas, right? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it essentially means sky. And it related to the animating life force behind things, you see? Whereas Madame Blavatsky took it to mean this, ever-existent, timeless library, on the astral plane where you could access any books or whatever, future or past or whatever, some of that stuff. And you see these ideas, how pervasive they are in modern Western New Age spirituality. Blavatsky was the mother of the New Age movement. The whole idea of the Aquarian Age largely came out of her stuff, right? She brought the idea of reincarnation to the West, you see? And even then, she sort of misrepresented it in many sort of ways. But you see how reincarnation is sort of taken for granted, sort of in the Western yoga, New Agey kind of movement. And I was involved in all that stuff for most of my life, so this is why I can talk a lot of shit about it, right? She fetishized Freemasonry, which even Freemasons did. She fetishized Rosa, and by fetishize, I mean she has attributed all these sort of magical powers and magical past to these ideas that wasn't really there, you know. Hi, Ms. Colston. Hi, Ms. Colston. I'm sorry I lost some of you fucking people because you didn't want to know about this important shit. We'll get to your chart readings, don't worry. Oh, Misha says, give me the secret of your youngness. The secret is being a Gemini, right? That's the secret. Forever young. I want to be forever young. I really hope I stay looking like this for at least another 10, 20 years. That would be lovely. So I can keep doing, you know, grown-up content too. But anyway, misrepresenting Indian Buddhist and all these different philosophies and justifying it by, well, those people whose tradition this is don't even know their own tradition, right? I mean, how colonial is that? How colonial is that? Like, well, you people don't even understand your own traditions, right? Now, Rosicrucianism, you know, fancied itself to be an older philosophy, but really, a lot of these things came out of the 18th century, that is the 1700s. And don't really have any mystical roots themselves, although we can talk about some of the mythology behind Freemasonry someday because I'm a Freemason. So, and I mean, I still love Masonry. It's made me who I am. I just don't agree with most of it anymore. So anyway, but Indian independence was largely influenced by Theosophy. Now, Blavatsky herself, you know, and her partner in crime, Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, are credited with bringing back Buddhist catechisms to Ceylon, which is now known as Sri Lanka, right? A country, I believe, adjacent to India, right? Are they in the south? But they're also a South Asian country and have their own rich spiritual tradition as well. But we can't confirm a lot of these things about Blavatsky. We don't really know that she brought this whole set of Buddhist catechisms to Ceylon or Sri Lanka, right? At least I haven't seen verification of it, except in books by other theosophists, right? That sort of take a lot of these stories for granted. So anyway, what you have to understand about her influence on modern astrology is that it gave birth to this whole other side, right? The idea of esoteric astrology, right? Incorporating the modern planets and the coming up with these modern rulerships and such. Now, that happened as these planets got discovered, of course. And we won't talk about those stories right now because y'all want your fucking charts read, you know. Vultures picking my bones for a charts reading. I did say we would read charts, don't worry, we will. But you can't ignore the influence on modern astrology and the philosophy behind it. You see, the idea of reincarnation. That, again, this is sort of reminiscent of other ancient philosophies, but that the human soul left its source, right? And for millions of years had been going through this process of like the different races, right? And these races, right, the Lemurian, the Atlantean, and the Aryan, she justified by saying, well, these aren't necessarily physical things. They have to do with consciousness, right? But then they would talk about the Caucasian race, right, being Aryan. It was like the fifth sub-race of the fifth root race of the fifth branch. You know, all these sorts of things to elevate, especially what they call the Anglo-Saxon race, you see. So she did put a physical connection or implication into these different designations. You see? So she brought sort of Darwinian evolution into spiritual human development. And this wasn't good, right? Because this also inspired Nazis. Not all of them, just a few of them, right? She popularized the swastika as a spiritual symbol. And you can see it in world religions. You can see it in Vedic culture. You can see it in Buddhist culture, right? But of course, it was, co-opted by the Nazis and brought into that whole thing. Now, what's even more important in all that is that you see things like the Aquarian Age, right? We talked about Akashic records. And then, of course, the idea of planes, right? In Hermeticism, there were the 7 spheres, right, of existence, ruled by the 7 traditional planets. And then there were sort of the 8th and 9th spheres, the realms of the soul and the divine realms. Well, she sort of took that into the idea of planes, right? There's like the astral plane and this plane and that plane. And sort of made up these arbitrary divisions in human experience, right? Sort of like the Kabbalistic tree of life in some way. That these all represented sort of stages in consciousness as one ascended, right, towards reunion with their source or initiation. So anyway, the bad part about all this is it gave rise to a bunch of other silly movements, including American Nazis, the silver shirts, right, who during the 1930s had a plot to overthrow the United States government and impose a fascist dictatorship, right? The I Am movement, which was also a Nazi movement, largely, founded around Theosophy. Then there was the woman who really popularized twin flames, right? The fuck was her name? Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, right? And she also was a proponent of a lot of, right-wing ideology in the spiritual community. And you'll see that far right, right-wing, racist, and even Nazi-type ideology pervades the Western spiritual movement. You wouldn't believe how much awful shit I've encountered, right? As sort of someone who's more of a left-wing astrologer and who's actually into real history and real science, right? And I see tons of that Nazi ideology pervade the spiritual community. Believe me, I've got harassed by lots of them, There's also sort of, they say conditions like being gay, being trans, right? Being queer, that these are all, defects, right? That come from soul defects or bad karma, right? The Western idea of karma came from Blavatsky and Theosophy, right? Karma as sort of retribution from the universe, right? The way the Buddha defined karma was volition, right? In Sanskrit, the root comes from action, right? It means action, essentially. So, and like C.S. Lewis, the author of, all the Narnia books, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis famously said that all of our choices that we make in life go into either making us, in the end, a heavenly creature or a hellish one, And that's sort of a representation in some respects of karma. Or maybe the more Western sort of idea of karma. But it has to do with action and volition, right? It has to do with choices. So, now, the other thing too is that they're still misrepresenting a lot of these philosophies in the West. Right now, today. For example, in Buddhism, they have what's called anatta, which means no soul or no self. So ultimately, many Buddhists, especially Mahayana and Theravada, which are two different sects of Buddhism, they don't believe, they say that God isn't really a thing, that the soul really isn't a thing, right? Because of interdependence. So we'll get to your charts in just a second, but I just want to follow up by saying if you pay attention to what people say online, right? Especially when it's white people or Western people in general, when they talk about karma, reincarnation, right? The masters, kundalini, right? Complete misunderstanding of what this is in the West. And then you have all these idiots online saying, oh my God, I had my kundalini experience, right? The misunderstanding of chakras or energy centers, right? What's called Laya yoga, I guess, in certain traditions, or more the Western tradition now. Right? Misrepresentations of these things pervade Western spiritual thought. Really, it's the New Age nonsense. And I make fun of New Age people because I was one, you see. So I can criticize this stuff with a bit of knowledge. So you see, that this is, again, why I sort of am very wary and suspicious of the New Age movement and people involved with it. By and large, people practicing a lot of these things don't even know about Madame Blavatsky, right? The whole Wiccan thing, what we consider witchcraft in the West, a lot of it is just derivative of Theosophy. Yeah. Now, on a positive note, Madame B. Blavatsky was the original girl boss in many respects. And a lot of us can take some lessons as women from what she did. We don't have to be grifters, but she had will, she had power, she had stamina, and she had force. She had a lot of health problems. Like I said, she smoked a shitload of tobacco, right? And that's why she died. I think died pretty young. I think maybe it was in her 60s, But she had that original grind set mindset, you see. And what you have to understand too about the context of the time she was coming up, it was extreme patriarchy, right? Women weren't allowed to do things. And in many ways, Madame Blavatsky broke that glass ceiling for women at the time. A lot of women didn't have the same, force or strength or will to push through as she did, right? Or the opportunity. She was rich, right? Her supposed ex-husband kept sending her money throughout her life. She had family money, aristocrat money. They kept sending her fucking money, right? Which funded a lot of her nonsense. But still, the spiritualist movement, the mediumistic movement, right? And then the New Age movement, by and large, offered women an avenue to be independent, right? So, for example, many of the people involved in spiritualism in the United States, that is the so-called mediums, as well as the larges and the smalls, right? The so-called mediums were usually women. And that was a way they found they could, have their own independent careers in sort of a way, right? But still, it was in the context of patriarchy, so all the people writing the spiritual books were men, except for Madame B, who had a prolific writing career, right? But largely made a bunch of stuff up that would become dangerous. So the Theosophical Society today is still around. It's just really ineffective. It's really wimpy, and it's full of lots of old ladies, crusty old ladies and crusty old guys. Crusty old ladies and crusty old guys, you see. They claim that we're in the Aquarian age now. And they'll even admit on their own websites that they don't really agree with actual Buddhist thought. And that they sort of they don't believe in actual science or archaeology. And a lot of the pseudo archaeologists, like all those motherfuckers on Ancient Aliens, or like Graham Hancock, right, who's got all these Netflix series now about looking for Atlantis. It's all nonsense. It's pseudoscience because it's based on mostly a lot of Madam B shit. And there's confirmation bias. So you see, they're looking for what they're looking for, and they make shit up to confirm it, right? For example, like these giant stone stairs in Peru. I think it was in Peru. But people are like, see, there were giants. She claims there were giant humans, right? That during the time of the dinosaurs, there were humans just as big as dinosaurs fighting them, and all this sort of thing. And so people are like, oh, look, giants exist. Well, no. This was for farming, right? These were different levels, right, of different ways to grow crops. And we know that from documentation. We know that her concept of how old the pyramids and the Sphinx are not correct. And a lot of the claims made by these Graham Hancock types and pseudo-archaeologists and ancient aliens idiots are completely wrong, right? They say there's images of light bulbs in the pyramids. Well, no, it's an image of a lotus, and it says right there what it is in hieroglyphics, right? And we can read all this stuff in modern day archaeologists and ancient historians who I idolize. You should also check out the Minuteman, or the Mini Minuteman, Milo. He's really good. He's really good. He's an archaeologist too, but really young. I think he's in his 20s. And then Dr. David Miano, I think, is a little bit older than me. So you should check them out. You really should. World of Antiquity is Dr. Miano's channel. And I think he's cute. I think he's cute. Other people think he looks like a chipmunk, and he kind of does. But he's just so brilliant, and I'm kind of demi when it comes to dudes. And I'm like, you're so smart. Tell me again, doctor. Happy birthday, Mr. Doctor. Doctor. Anyway. So, you see, all this shit is really corrupting minds around the world today, particularly in the West. And the influence, all this fetishization of Indian culture, right, now sort of terminates in Hindu nationalism, in Indian nationalism. There's a big movement in India, which is called the Out of India movement, that believes that humans originated from India. Even though the mitochondrial record in mitochondrial DNA goes back to Africa, right? Out of Africa. Meanwhile, they want to claim that modern humans are all descended from India, right? And there's all kinds of other stupid theories or whatever about that. And that's blatantly racist and xenophobic, right? There's a big anti-Muslim movement in India, as we know, right? Or many of you may know. Misha, you probably know. Anyway, we'll go on to fucking charts now, because I know that everyone's pissed about it. But you see, the first half of these live streams is going to be talking about this stuff, right? It's going to be talking about this sort of stuff. And then the second half is when we get to your chart readings, which is now, right? Which is now. But you need to understand some of this history so you know where things come from. Because a lot of the shit that we take for granted, in Western spirituality and modern sort of occult and esoteric philosophy, magical philosophy and all this, largely comes from her. Yeah? And what comes from her is a distortion. So just be aware. Who's that other guy? Alan Watts. Aleister Crowley. L. Ron Hubbard, right, who started Scientology. These people all came from the Theosophical tradition, particularly Crowley, right? Alan Watts, of course, was in that same sort of, that same sort of cohort. And I'm like, rather than listening to Alan Watts, why don't you go check out what these philosophies actually said? That would be more interesting, and you would get a lot more out of it. I can tell you from experience, right? A mentor of mine once told me, like, oh, don't bother. Don't bother with those ancient books. So you don't want me to read where things actually come from. Just read The Secret Doctrine. I enjoy Alan Watts' lectures. You can enjoy it all you want. I suggest that you hear what these actual philosophies and traditions really said. That's really important, I used to love Alan Watts too. I used to love Blavatsky. All I did was Blavatsky and Alice Bailey for many years. Alice Bailey, of course, right? Who became a driving force behind modern astrology, the whole concept of esoteric astrology. All this stuff came from her and her involvement with the Theosophical Society, you see, which is really quite interesting. So there's all these connections. So go ahead and, read Alan Watts, read Aleister Crowley, but just go back and check out these ancient philosophies because they say many different things to what's being communicated. We often get a really sort of distorted and watered down version from these Western people who typically didn't understand them anyway. I'm thinking about taking Adam Ellenboss's Introduction to Astrology. So I'm always going to toot my own horn and say, just pay attention to me. But I took Adam Ellenboss's Year 1 and Year 2. I took Adam Ellenboss's Ancient Astrology courses, Year 1 and Year 2. I'm not done with Year 2. But I can tell you I did learn a lot, even as someone who's been practicing astrology for almost 20 years. I learned a lot. And I do recommend them. They're just expensive, which, I totally understand. I would be charging comparable money if I were him. And hopefully I will someday, for my own courses. But yeah, I do recommend it. And he's one of the few astrologers I like. In retrospect, I wish I'd taken Chris Brennan's courses instead. I took Chris Brennan's courses on zodiacal releasing, which also was really good. I've taken Kelly Surtees' course on progressions, which was really good. Yeah. I took one of Austin Kopic's courses too, just to see how it was. So I have learned a lot from courses, but the one I would really recommend out of all of it would probably be Adam Ellenboss. Yeah. Adam Ellenboss is great. I have a different take on spirituality, of course, because I'm Saturn girl. But yeah, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. I learned a lot. And a lot of the new techniques that I've been incorporating into my own practice, a lot of that I got from him. Zodiacal releasing that I've been doing I got more from Chris Brennan. But the wonderful thing that you learn about in Adam Ellenboss's courses is dignity, right? In Year 1, you learn a lot about dignity. And that's something that a lot of people don't really pay enough attention to. Planetary condition, because there are many levels of dignity. And so for those of you who are members of my channel, we'll do a brief introduction into dignity. Maybe before we go into more detail about the houses, I don't know. Because it's a very, very practical topic, you see. And house rulers, of course. I'm going to check out the sliding scale to see if it's doable. If you're going to take a course without me, just I'm the most interesting person out of all these astrologers. You know, they're all fucking boring people. Adam Ellenboss, though, he's very endearing, right? He just has, I don't know, I just like the guy. I just like him. Even though he irks me sometimes about some of the other stuff. But no, I really like the guy, and I think he's a good person from what I can tell. And he's brilliant. And his courses are great, you know. So anyway, let's get to your fucking charts. That's why I watch you. Yeah, because at least I'm funny. I'm cute. And I know my shit. See, I know a lot of the ancient history from my own sort of research and stuff anyway. And I have a lot of experience with Theosophy, Freemasonry, modern astrology, right? And the New Age bullshit. So I can speak on those things with a bit of authority, you know? So that's part of what you'll get from me that you don't get from the other people. So, although Chris Brennan does go into a lot of this stuff too. Saturn Girl's reading charts. Yes, I am reading charts. I just want to know, what the fuck? I wanted to go back and see who was it that put their information in here. Are you still here? Where was... Oh. Diasporama. What other chats are there? I mean, I have YouTube and I have Twitch chats. Yeah. Both going on. So please. Please, please, please. Just let me know if you're still here and you want a reading. Eric, you're awesome. I love when you say nonsense. You do know your shit. Love it. Oh, I've been studying a lot of this stuff for many years. So I better. Are you still here, Diasporama? Because we'll do you. And thank you to those who hung out through my talk about Madam B. Oh, the Ivory Coast. So we have someone from Africa. Look at that. Are you still here, sweetheart? I'll start putting your information in. I'm trying to use my ergonomic mouse and keyboard now, so I'm still getting used to it. Diasporama. 410 1981 2:55 p.m. Oh, Misha said namaste. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Let's see if Diasporama's still here. Here we go. Oh, I went to YouTube. Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So, okay, cool. So we do have you here. We're about to look at your chart. Do you have any specific questions, my darling? Because if you have a specific question, let me turn off Blavatsky. Let me turn off Blavatsky. And let me see if this young lady is here. Okay. We're looking at charts. So anyway, but let me know if you have a specific question, sweetheart, and I'll try to focus on that. Otherwise, I'll just start riffing and talk about timing and stuff too. So here we go. I hope I have all your information correct. April 10th, 1981. 2:55 p.m. Abidjan. Abidjan, Ivory Coast, Africa. No specific question. Okay, I'll just say a little bit. See, you're a Leo rising, so you're opposite me. I'm Aquarius rising. And your ascendant degrees sort of to the end of Leo, but still, I do whole sign houses, so Leo would still be your first house, you see. Now, you do have a happy moon in Cancer, right? You have a happy Mars in Aries. You have a happy Saturn exalted in Libra, sort of like me. In fact, you're just a couple years older than me, so, still around the same age. Did I get all your information correct? Yeah. Cool. Excuse me. Oh. Anyway. So it's a happy moon, happy Saturn, happy Mars. Now what sucks, though, is the moon in the 12th house. And we often see that correlate with mental health issues like depression. We also see it correlate with addiction, right? With things of self-undoing, self-destructive behavior, right? Which can usually indicate one's own mental health issues. So you just have to be careful of some of that sort of thing. Now, Mars is very happy. You have what's called a stellium. That means 3 or more planets conjunct in the same sign. So you have Venus, the Sun, and Mars. So and the Sun is your first house ruler. There's going to be an emphasis on spirituality pretty much your whole life. Now, you can also see this with people who are very interested or obsessed with foreign cultures or foreign religions, right? Who make a pilgrimage or who move to a new country or new state at some point in their lives. And maybe always have the sense that they will, right? But I have my first house ruler, Saturn, in the 9th house as well. You see, you probably have more of a mystical approach to spirituality than I do. Whereas for me, I'm sort of like, very critical and anti-spiritual in many respects. But see, God or divinity or the path or just the idea of existence has been just built into your makeup since you were a young child, right? The difficult thing is Mars in the 9th house. Mars gives us an unpleasant experience of religion growing up, right? Mars gives us conflict around religion or spirituality growing up. It was probably that your father was probably particularly religious, maybe, and that may have put a distaste for religion, at least. Oh, thank you. Anyway, so that may have been an issue with you. Your father may have been religious and may have been like a bit fanatically religious, and it may have been upsetting to you as a child, and you may have gotten a distaste in your mouth about religion. But Venus in the 9th house. Now, Venus isn't happy in Aries, is she? So, on the one hand, you may be very attracted to other spiritual type people or deep people or foreign women, right? Women from other cultures. Oh, well, I don't know if you're a man or a woman. Sorry. I see Venus and you may be interested in partners, right? From other cultures or other countries or other religions, perhaps. And your sun is conjunct your sun like mine. So that gives us, an aggressive sort of bent, you see? Oh, you're a bi woman. Okay, well, there you go. Now, do we see any signatures of bisexuality? So we typically look for Uranus aspects or we look for Mars-Venus aspects. And you have Venus conjunct Mars, right? Which can give women a more sort of masculine presentation. Or make them a bit more aggressive, or make them less traditionally feminist or feminine in some ways. And then on top of that, Venus rules your 10th house, which tells me, because Venus isn't happy in Aries, that your life direction, your career, and all that sort of thing has been very difficult. And then with Chiron in the 10th house too, you probably feel directionless. Yeah? Directionless. But life direction starts to emerge more as you get older. Right? You have your North Node in the first house. So at this time in your life, you should be more focused on your own confidence, your own independence, right? Your own accomplishments. That would be very important for you right now, you see? Now the other thing too is Saturn in the third house. Even though it's a happy Saturn, it's also retrograde. And, you may have had speech impediments, learning disabilities, problems with elementary school, or bad relationships with your siblings, right? Difficult relationships with siblings. That can be that sort of a thing too, you see. But what's important right now to talk about too is timing, right? So now you got Saturn going through your 8th house, right? Which is all about losses. So this started in March of last year. So since March of last year and now, you probably have experienced either a big loss in money, right? Or perhaps a loss of a person or someone close to you. That's also something that happens. But typically it depresses our finances and all that. So you see, you've had Saturn going through the 8th house, and then you just had the lunar eclipse in the 8th house. So there's sort of a double signature of having to get your money situation in order. What? I gotta stop answering this shit. Okay. Ugh, my daughter's bike. I gotta stop looking at that shit. So anyway, the lunar eclipse was in your 8th house. So you see, and then Jupiter just went retrograde here and has been making a sort of square on and off to Saturn. So all the indication here, what are your 2 Sag houses? The 8th house, of course, and your 2 Jupiter houses, and then the 5th house, of course. So on the one hand, this might feel like a decrease in fun, like you're having to consolidate your funds and your resources. There may be a significant debt that is just mushroomed in your face, and you need to address it. The other thing the 8th house has to deal with is insurance, right? Insurance and investment. So just be careful of some of this stuff, right? Typically, I think of a loss of money, which could, which in this case, I would often say it's debt, right? It's having to take care of, pay off, consolidate, and organize your debt, which also entails organizing your resources. And this isn't just from Saturn, it's from the lunar eclipse, and it's from the Jupiter stuff, you see? Jupiter going retrograde. Now, the other thing about all this, on top of that, is that the solar eclipse that just happened too was in your 3rd house. And oftentimes this can bring, siblings or cousins or a family member like coming back into our lives. It also entails either going back to school, doing writing or speaking projects, right? This is all sort of important kind of stuff too. So now in this phase of your life, which is about to end now next year, the eclipses have been focused in your 3rd and 9th houses. This has been about a fundamental reorientation in your beliefs, you see. A fundamental reorientation in your beliefs. And then next year, Saturn will go into your 9th house, which will probably deconstruct all those beliefs you previously had. And you're going to have to wade through a new world understanding, and it may make you feel a little depressed or a bit meaningless, right? But this is all good. This is good stuff because it opens your mind up to be available to new things. It's only by letting go of the past that we can accept the new things of the future. We can make space for newer and uh, more palatable values in line with ourselves and who we are becoming, you see? Anyway. I wonder if you had religious siblings too. Religious siblings. Anyway, we got to get to this next person who gave me a hefty donation. Um, I gotta check this out. What? Um, Let me see. God, these fucking people. I'm busy, yo. I'm busy, yo. I was everyone is religious but me and my father. Well, I mean, with Mars, he may have rejected religion. But usually when you see Mars, it's cutting shit off, right? We cut ourselves off from religion. We also see with Mars in the ninth house that you can be a bit fanatic sometimes. People who get very aggressive about what they believe. Let's do this other young lady. So we have Erica. We have Erica. Erica. Excuse me. Erica Lynn. What time tomorrow? Ugh, I hate the way... I fucking hate people. Erica, you are here. So we have Erica Da Silva. Okay. Erica. You're a Gemini like me, Erica. (1982), and you're like almost exactly a year older than me. That's so funny. You're almost exactly a year older than me. Sacramento. Every time I think of Sacramento, I think of it in Arnold's voice. Sacramento, California. I will do the people's work. We got to bring money back to our schools. To me, the people come first. Oh my goodness. Erica. Erica. So we have an Aries rising with Venus in the first house. Venus in the first house often makes someone quite attractive. You know, it can give a very pretty demeanor. I bet you're a pretty lady. I bet you're a pretty lady. Yeah? Are you? I bet you are. Excuse me. OMG, my dad was Arnold's protection detail. That's so funny. That's so funny. He's a Leo, you know, very Leo. I love my Arnold impression. It's a terrible Arnold impression, but your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle, give them to me. Or Predator, right? Dylan, right? He goes, you son of a bitch. I used to do Arnold prank calls with like those old soundboards back when I was in high school. You know, it's funny. Anyway, so it often confers a very attractive appearance with Venus in the eighth house. I was just listening to Chris Brennan talk about the first house this morning, and they were talking about the famous actor Paul Newman, right? Very attractive sort of guy. Venus in the first house, right? Oh, you'll know this being from California. Gavin Newsom. Gruesome Newsom. Gruesome Gavin, right? He also is a pretty attractive guy, you know? And he's got Venus in the first house too. And an unhappy Venus in Virgo. Just like you have an unhappy Venus in Aries, right? Get to the chopper! Right? Get to the chopper! I love Predator. Such a good movie. Such a good movie. And then Conan the Barbarian, he hardly says anything at all, right? Or Red Sonja. I believe he was in Red Sonja also, which was the same movie, basically. So you see, Venus isn't happy in Aries. Now, for someone born female, it can make you a bit brash and less feminine. I always joke about Venus in Aries that, you know, it's that chick that goes into the men's room and, you know, uses the urinal in front of all the guys because the women's bathroom was too long of a line. I think of women who can get sort of, who make men feel uncomfortable sometimes, you see? Because they tend to be a bit, you see, Venus is kind of how we relate to people in general. Venus in the opposite sign, Libra, which she rules, is very diplomatic, very gracious and very graceful, and very aware of social norms and conventions. Whereas in the opposite sign, Aries, she's not. She's like a bull in a china shop. She's pissing people off. She's saying things that she shouldn't say. She's not thinking about social conventions or being polite, right? She's going and peeing in the urinal in the boys' room, you know. But you're still probably quite conventionally attractive. And then look at this. You have Venus opposite Pluto, right? Now, my daughter has this. I've got like at least two, maybe three ex-partners that have this. And the thing they all have in common, well, my daughter doesn't have this in common with them because she can do no wrong in my eyes. But usually this makes people a bit creepy, especially with relationships and pursuing partners. You can't be fucking normal. You can't just be like, hi, wow, like you're really attractive. Do you want to go out sometime? Or how would you like to grab a cup of coffee? No. It's this sort of thing. Think of Wednesday trying to be, right? Wednesday Addams in the show Wednesday. Think of her trying to be flirty. It's like a Scorpio Venus thing too. But you see, you have Aries Venus, which is already kind of forceful, opposite Pluto, which can get what? Possessive, jealous, sort of imposing or controlling. I see I had this with one of my ex-girlfriends who, was ironically supposed to be my submissive, but instead tried to control my entire life. And you can see that with these sort of Plutonian things, right? And you have a couple different Plutonian things. In fact, you are a Plutonian person, or I call it Plutonian. And yes, I still fuck with the outer planets, even though I mostly do traditional, because they're still relevant and they're still important, you see. So Pluto square the moon. Usually that means mama trauma. A domineering, aggressive, or even abusive sometimes mother, right? I'm not saying you necessarily had that, but that's often what it looks like. And I call it the bipolar coaster, right? We have high highs and low lows, don't we? I mean, I have Pluto conjunct the moon, which is sort of similar. Pluto moon, we often see the bipolar coaster. I mean, I'm literally bipolar. It's not always that you're diagnosed bipolar or whatever. I happen to be, and I have to take medication for it. But just the general trend of high highs and low lows emotionally, right? Like we soar to these inspirational heights, then plunge to these despondent lows, It can be rough. Now, along with all that, is all this shit in your seventh house, right? The seventh house of relationships is going to be quite pronounced. Now, I wonder if you had a good relationship with your dad. I mean, I would have imagined so, just because the moon is happy in Cancer in your fourth house. Now, moon square Pluto, maybe I'm totally wrong, right? You also have moon square Venus, like me. Moon square Venus can make us very paranoid in relationships, you see? It can make us very sort of it can whittle away our confidence, right? It can sort of take away some of our confidence because it's like our need for emotional security is at odds with our need to relate to people, you see? And often what that leads to is paranoia in relationships. Like when we fall in love, we get insecure. Like the big thing about moon square Venus is insecurity, you know? Sometimes we have a shyness, even if we're not really a shy person. Like I don't think you are. But we still have this weird shyness about people that we like or that, that we're having a crush on or our partners. I always used to get paranoid in my relationships thinking like, oh my gosh, they're going to find someone better, someone cuter, someone smarter, someone younger, Why did I just put my other hair behind my ear? It wasn't a good idea. God, I should stop looking at the camera. Oh, because I'm going to do an adult stream after this, so I'll have to fix my hair anyway. Anyway, it doesn't fucking matter. What matters is your chart, right? So you have all these interesting sorts of things, Your 10th house ruler is Saturn, right? Happy in Libra, but retrograde. So the good career stuff, right? Or any modicum of success that you get in life is sort of happening now, isn't it? Right? You have the moon square Saturn too, which is more mommy stuff, So good career stuff is probably happening around now. But when you have Saturn in the 7th house too, it makes us sort of, mistrust people early on, right? Oftentimes we get hyper independent, and not because we want to be, but because we feel like we can't trust people. Like we get let down when we're younger. We get let down by someone, and then we put up these walls, right? You're going to build a wall, and you're going to pay for it emotionally. So you see, a big lesson for Saturn in the 7th house is how to learn to be vulnerable again, because vulnerability comes from a place of strength, not weakness. The ability to be vulnerable with people comes from a sense of security in yourself, right? So that's important to remember. That's important to remember. You have Saturn on your descendant, right? So opposite your ascendant. This also hurts our confidence. It can give things like body dysmorphia. Like you're probably very pretty with Venus in the 1st house. But then you got Saturn square the moon on the one hand, right? And opposite your ascendant. So this often means that we have a sense of body dysmorphia or even gender dysphoria. I have Saturn square my ascendant in conjunct my moon. So even if you're very beautiful, you might feel like, oh, I'm so gross, I'm so ugly, no one could ever like me, and you do this negative self-talk perhaps. So, but we need to talk about just timing really quickly, because then we'll have to move on to other people. But you've been in one of the most important times in your life. Bexy, thank you. Bexy's like, your hair is fine. Thank you. My hair. Bexy and I will be having intimate time, and I'm like, hold on, I gotta put my hair up. I hope that I could say that. I hope you're not gonna get mad at me for saying that. But anyway, this has been one of the most important times in your life, because you've been having the solar eclipses oscillate between your 1st and 7th house. This is like the beginning of the whole eclipse cycle for you. It's sort of like starting over again, right? You went through a very difficult time in 2022 that may have been uncomfortable with your material situation. You may have had issues with money, right? And you may have had a death, like a literal death or debt situation just blow up in your face. But you've been coming through that, and you probably sort of not resolved, but at least got that issue under control. And for the past year and a half, or since April of 2023, rather, so yeah, a year and a half, you've had the focus on your sense of identity and relationships. So probably since October of 2023, excuse me, you may have had a significant breakup or met a new person. But you see, a lot of this comes out of your own sense of identity. It's like our relationship to ourselves. Bexy, I gotta put mine up sometimes too. You sure do. You don't want to get that hair in your mouth. Yeah. But this has been one of the most important times in your life, because how we relate to ourselves affects how we relate to other people. And how we relate to other people affects how we relate to ourselves, doesn't it? So you see, very important stuff. You're going through an existential crisis, quite likely. And this is all going to come to a climax with the solar eclipse March 29th of next year, right? But right before that, in January, you'll notice the nodes are moving into your 6th and 12th house. So out of this tumultuous, you've had a time of big activity in your life, you see. But you'll be coming out of that in January, hopefully. I mean, March will be sort of the climax and the end at the same time. I love climaxing. I love climaxes. You know? Climax. So anyway, you're going to be entering this phase in your life where it's going to be more about the cocoon phase. Saturn's going through your 12th house. What does that mean? That means you've been isolated. Yet life takes you out of society and the busyness. When this happened to me, you know, I was kicked out of my house by my ex-wife, and I went to move in with friends who were sort of living outside of the busy town area. They were living more in the country, you see? So quite literally, sometimes we get pulled out of our comfort zone, right? And sort of ejected or exiled or rejected or cast out. And you see, what the lunar eclipse meant for you was indicating that you need to get out of that period of your life. It probably felt like waking up from being drunk or from, you know, a nightmare and like, wait, what the fuck am I doing here? This is not working for me. We got to start either reconnecting or, you know, working on ourselves or whatever. But then next year, this will lead to a year and a half of existential crisis, right? Nearly 2 years of an existential crisis of Saturn in your first house. But all this is good and very timely, because you see, you've gone from this sort of existential crisis period in your life where all these new things are dawning on you to what's called the cocoon phase, where you have to assimilate these things, and you assimilate them as Saturn sort of sits on your face. And not in a good way. I mean, yes, in a good way. We get faced with hidden parts of ourselves during this time. We get faced with things we'd rather not look at, you know. Oftentimes we face our own sense of mortality, right? We become acutely aware of the fact that we're going to die. And this isn't always so morose and melancholy. This can also represent becoming aware that life is short. And again, this is one of the insidious things about the idea of reincarnation in the West, is that people take it for granted. Well, next life, I'll do better. You don't know that you have a next life. Do this shit right fucking now. It was after this transit for me that I came out as trans. Number one, it was being, you know, I was being forced with parts of myself I didn't face before. But number two, I became aware that life was short and that I didn't want to live in misery anymore. I wanted to be myself. So there are many liberating things about that Saturn. And I just want you to know, stuff will get it will get better, yes, but it will also require that you do some self-investigation and that you be honest with yourself about sort of these things that you haven't wanted to face, whatever that means to you. So, who else wants a reading? I hope that was good for you, Erica. I hope that was good for you, Erica. Who else wants a reading? I can always look at Bexy's. Your hair is fine. I gotta put it. So sound off. Who else wants a reading? We don't have very many viewers today. That kind of sucks. Forever young. I wanna be forever young. Do you really wanna live forever? Forever. Who else wants their chart looked at? Otherwise, I'll talk more about Madam B. Thank you, Erica. And thank you for the generous donation. Yes, you can ask for tarot, Bexy. You can ask for tarot. I don't want everyone to see my stupid shorts, but I have to grab my cards. I'm wearing a cute top and like these stupid workout shorts because I'm like, oh, you can't see them. But you're going to see them, they're camo shorts. Oh. Okay. I tried to hide my shorts as much as possible. But what you may not realize is that I've practiced tarot for many years as well. Basically, as long as I've been practicing astrology. I paid way more attention to astrology. I have this cheap pink deck because all my decks, they get tattered and worn so quickly. So I try and just buy these cheap decks, But you may not know this. Before I was a Freemason, I was in an organization called Builders of the Atom, right? Which is BOTA. And that organization was started by Paul Foster Case, who is one of the most famous tarot teachers and students, right? Paul Foster Case was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but the second incarnation, right, when it came back, when it was revived, not the same one Crowley was in, or Crowley. OTO people will get mad about me saying Crowley. It's Crowley. You have to say it right. Say Crowley, right? So yeah, in Paul Foster Case, was intimately connected with tarot for much of his life, In fact, it's rumored that he may be one of the 3 initiates that wrote this book, right? The Kabbalion, which is not really Hermetic philosophy. It's a distortion of it. But still, it's interesting stuff. And it was a big part of my development growing up. So Bexy wants to know about her living situation. So I'm going to draw 3 cards. Card number 1 is where you are now, always. Card number 2 is the problem. And card number 3 is the outcome. So we'll kind of take, one flipped over. I'm just going to briefly mention this. This is the 8 of Wands, right? And wands have to do with will, right? Action, power, all that sort of driving energy. Oh, Mitch and Twilight, yay! Oh, you would love a tarot reading or astrology? If you'd love a tarot reading, I'll do one for you too. But anyway, the 8 of Wands, as I was just talking about, is about speed, quickness, right? It's quickening. It typically means that things are speeding up, that a situation is accelerating, and that the outcome is rapidly approaching. Usually you see this when things are starting to take off. But we're going to do the 3-card spread, okay? I do sort of look at cards that pop out of the deck. Talking about Madam B is also fun. Well, no, I want to give you... I mean, I did talk about Madam B. Okay. So, Bexy's living situation. Will it change? Forever young. I want to be forever young. I used to have a good voice until I ruined it. I ruined it. I keep messing with my hair. Anyway. So the first card, where you're at now. This is the Hierophant, right? It's sort of the Taurus card, right? So the focus is on the material situation, but oftentimes it does represent sort of a, you know, someone's lording something over you, oftentimes. Like I said, it's the Taurus card. But the Hierophant also has to do with, you know, with observances, with strict kind of things, you know, with rules and all that sort of... It's very inert in many ways. So this sort of indicates that right now, and it has to do a lot with ritual, habit. Yeah. So you're sort of stuck in a legacy situation, you know. It also has to do with tradition. So like, this is the way it's always been, you know. This is the way you do things. This is the way we do things. These are the rules, right? Now the problem is, well, 4 of Swords, that's not too bad. But it usually represents not doing anything, right? Taking a rest. I mean, you may not be sure what to do, so you just aren't doing anything, you know? It's sort of like waiting, like hurry up and wait. But it also means taking a rest from conflict sometimes too. So what happens after the climax or the crescendo of a conflict, whether that's between people or someone in a situation or a circumstance. But that's oftentimes what it means. Now, the solution, or the outcome rather, is the Ace of Pentacles, which has to do with money in your own material situation. So what this says to me is needing to cultivate your own material situation. So if the question is, what will happen to your living situation? This indicates a positive outcome in that it'll be more advantageous and will bring your life more value and more material value, like very literally. Or it could be that material value sort of assists you in improving your situation. So I know that in your chart, there's a lot of indicators that, you know, life is going to be changing in terms of your job trajectory, your career, and your life direction. Whatever that looks like to you, I'm not sure. But that's, you know, that's how I would read the chart. And this is saying, hey, you have some good luck with personal resources, with wealth and possessions coming up in the future. This one is saying the problem is that you're not really doing anything, or that maybe you don't want to make a move because you're unsure. And this is sort of saying that you're bound in a situation that's tedious and really only based on the past. So these are all important things to recognize. But I really love this. I love this outcome. I love this outcome. So anyway, I hope that's useful. I hope that's useful. I'm starting to get hungry. I'm going hungry. Okay, we'll do Mitch and Twilight. I'm going hungry. I'm going hungry. I'm going hungry. right? That was Temple of the Dog, which was Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, Chris Cornell, you know. Um, what was it called? Uh, 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 uh. I'm going hungry. I'm going hungry. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Whatever. 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 So, I mean, the other thing that's part of the Hierophant, though, that I was forgetting is the educational bit. I think I did share about the educational bit, right? It's also learning from someone. I just don't see how that fits in, but anyway, let's do Mitch and Twilight. Mitch and Twilight. Do you have a question, Mitch and Twilight? Oh. I just wonder what on earth would change my career. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying what it looks like in the chart. I could be totally wrong. But you've got Saturn going through your 10th house. You just had the lunar eclipse in your 10th house, right? Jupiter rules your 10th house and went retrograde. So, I mean, it could feel like your career's like you feel stuck in it. But it seems to me like something is going to intervene to change your life trajectory. I just don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that is to you. So Mitchin. Please tell me. Please tell me, Mitchin. What is it you want? Do you have a question? Otherwise, I'll just do general info. Do you have a question, Mitchin? Mitchin question. Mitchin. Mitchin, please tell me. Otherwise, I'll just start talking. Mitchin. Mitchin Smitchin. Mitchin. Mitchin Kitchen. I don't see a question, so I'm just going to start talking. First, we see temperance. First, we see temperance, right? This card actually has a lot to do with Sagittarius. And you might notice, right? The this character here with, you know, 2 cups sort of mixing stuff back and forth. And we do see this card related to blending and combining things. So it may be that you're trying to bring the... Oh, you're from Seattle? I don't know what that has to do with anything. But cool, you're from Seattle. The Seahawks, right? I don't know anything about sports except for Seahawks from Seattle. But this card has to do with a lot of blending and combining, which means you could be trying to combine something of your views, your experiences in the past with what you're doing now. Maybe you're being shifted into a new direction. See, because this represents where you are now, but it also represents trying to get your life under control in some ways. You know, trying to find a balance. Trying to find a balance between different extremes in your life, you know. You could be oscillating between this and that, that and this, right? And you may find yourself wasting or overusing something, or being too licentious. And this is saying, hey, let's ring it in a little bit, or rein it in a little bit. Let's rein it in a little bit. Excuse me. Now, it also has to do with escape. So you could be escaping a habit, perhaps, that holds you back. So, of Mother Love Bone, they were memorialized. Andrew Wood. Yeah, what was the Andrew Wood thing? How do I know Andrew Wood? Andrew Wood was a tarot person, or I don't know. Who was Andrew Wood? I can't remember. Oh, here's the problem, which is sort of weird because this is one of my favorite cards. I'm an endless romantic, and by that I mean I'm a sex addict. So I love seeing this card. I love seeing this card, right? But being the problem, you're attached to somebody. You're attached to some emotional feelings that make it very difficult to figure out the situation. Either there's something you really want to do or you want to move on from something. Probably also my living situation, honestly. Change is coming, but how is still evading me. Well, you're still attached to something about that situation, whatever it is. And it looks like it has to do with love, feelings, emotions. This is overwhelming emotion. See, look, my cup runneth over, right? My cup runneth over. Question, focus above. Well, we can redo that. Is this about your living situation then? Is this about your living situation then? Well, depending, whatever general stuff we were talking about, we had the Chariot, which is about positive movement. Oh. Now it's the Cancer card, but it also has to do, you see, Cancer starts things. It's a cardinal sign. So you see, it sort of makes sense having the Chariot related to Cancer a bit. It represents vitality, energy, direction, going after what we want. So, I mean, I can look at this really briefly again, but this is saying here that you need to escape, or that you want to escape a current situation, but you're too attached to it, to the nostalgia, the past, the emotion, but that the outcome is letting go and finding direction, you see. You have to go to a meeting? Okay, I love you, baby. I love you, baby girl. You have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later. Where are the rest of my goddamn cards? So Mitchin will specifically just ask about your living situation here. Oh, I was singing Temple of the Dog. Duh. Yeah, duh. I'm going hungry. I'm going hungry. Right? My voice can't go high anymore because I ruined it with substances. So Mitchin living situation. Okay, living situation. So your current thing, once again, Queen of Cups, which to me tells me that you're not moving, right? The Queen of Cups is sort of emotion. She's sort of passive. She's not active. She's sort of like waiting for something. But she's also attached, you see? Interesting, my sun and moon sign came out in the cards. Yeah, shit like that happens. It's pretty wild. But this tells me you're attached to this. If this has to do with your home situation, once again, a lot of emotion around it, attachment, difficult to let go of, right? See, you keep getting these good cards as problems. This is happiness, right? This is a modicum of emotional success and contentment. So perhaps that's another reason why it's hard to move if you're trying to move. because it feels perhaps like you're going to lose that. Oh, singer of Mother Love Bone. You were, yeah, exactly. Can I have a reading? I don't know my chart though. I was born in a third world country. Well, if I can't do your chart, if you don't know your birth date and time and city, I can do a tarot reading for you, and we can see what we can discern and glean from that. So something about happiness, though, is keeping this situation from moving. And maybe this is an indicator of why, right? There's a certain amount of happiness and contentment, and you probably don't want to rock the boat, you know? But look what we have here, the final card. This is the outcome in the solution. The Two of Wands, which is known as dominion, right? Dominion, control, resolution. To me, this represents personal power. So what this reading is saying to me is that you need to develop the drive and the will to take control of your situation, because passively waiting for shit to happen is not working for you. And on the one hand, the problem is happiness, because A, you're too attached to the previous situation, and B, because you know that a new situation will make you happier, but there's fear around pursuing it. And maybe not like explicit fear, but the fear of discomfort, the fear of effort. You probably don't want to put any work into something. And this is saying that you need to take control of yourself and your situation. This is dominion, right? And control. Otherwise, the passivity and inability to make movement will control you. Yes, that is spot on. Past sense of filial loyalty. Yeah, there you go, loyalty. This is attachment, right? Emotional attachment. This is contentment. Being content, maybe not excited or in love with the situation, but this is fine. This is good. This is a modicum of happiness and contentment. So needing to push through and find your own sense of self-dominion is very important with this whole thing, because you don't want to move on, right? There's attachment there. So now we need to do Wapato Patore. Wapato Patore. Wapatu Tapore. Oops. Wapato Tapore. Do. Do you have a question, Wapato? Do you have a question, Wapato? Wepito. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Do you have a particular question? Otherwise, I'll just do general shit. Ah! Wapato. Wapato. So I'm just doing general, because you just said yes, please. And I assume that means yes, please, just general. So first we have the world. This is your situation. This is the Saturn card, right? Oftentimes it means being confined, right? Not necessarily in a bad way or imprisoned, but it's sort of like it's dominion, but in the opposite direction. It's being trapped, feeling like stuck in a prison, feeling like you can't get movement. Saturn kind of stuff, confinement, right? But also it can represent perseverance. pushing through situations as well. It can be perseverance, and it can be a sense of confinement or imprisonment in some way. It could be your own emotional situation. It could be a work situation. It could be material or just straight up, emotional, as I said. Now the problem is the Two of Swords, which represents choice. This has a lot to do with Libra. In fact, the moon in Libra, right? It's about distinguishing between this and that, truth and falsehood. People could be feeding you incorrect information, and you have to learn to make a wise choice. So this is the problem, you see. People are probably treating you like a mushroom, right? Keeping you in the dark and feeding you bullshit. So this is where you have to learn to use your own wise judgment and discernment. This card is about gathering facts and paying attention and learning to make a well-informed, wise choice, right? The swords do what? They divide one thing from another, right? Swords divide things. That's why they have to do with the mind, with analysis and all this sort of thing. So that's why this is what? Choice. Now the outcome or the solution is the Magician. What does the Magician do? You see, this is the Mercury card, yeah? Mercury adapts. This is adaptable. The Magician adapts themselves to the environment, but also adapts what is magic? Magic is using your will to change the environment, isn't it, according to Crowley? So the Magician here not only adapts themselves to the environment, but also adapts the environment to them, you see? Duty, I am a Virgo. She is a Taurus. See, there's a lag with the chat here, because I'm just now seeing Mitch and Twilight. I'm just now seeing your... excuse me. Anyway, this is all about doing things, but it's about learning to cooperate with your environment, right? And adapt to it and adapt it to yourself. So once again, you have to understand the things, number one, that you can't change and that you have to adapt to. And number two, you have to realize the things that you can change and adapt to yourself, right? And that's one thing that humans are quite adept at, right? Adapt, right? Silly words. This is one thing that humans are quite good at. They're good at, number one, adapting to their environment, and number two, adapting it to them. For example, you can see history taken up with all these sorts of inventions to overcome nature, right? Like steamships and, I don't know, all sorts of things. Planes, right? Flying in the air, all that sort of stuff. Jazzy Dreamer. Hello, sweetheart. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, excuse me. So anyway, just to summarize, you're feeling trapped, but you need to persevere. Now, the issue is making a choice. You have to learn to make a choice. And you're probably getting incorrect information from somebody, right? Someone's feeding you incorrect information. So it's up to you to practice discernment and do some investigation and make your own choice. And what does that show you? It shows you that the solution to your problem is adapting. Is adapting to a situation, right? Not necessarily accepting nor rejecting it, but learning how to work with it. And if you can't work with it, then trying to influence it to suit your needs. That's what a magician does, don't they? Magicians are changing something in the environment to suit their needs. Now that's sort of a very broad definition of magic, but you know. Who else wants a reading? I have tarot here, and of course I have astrology. I just had a couple people want a tarot reading because I'm doing naked tarot now on some adult platforms. I mean, only a couple people wanted a naked tarot reading, but usually they just want the naked part without the tarot reading. You know? So who wants more? Tell me more, like did he have a car? Grease. Anyone else want to read it? That's crazy, the Libra card showed up. Someone from back home said I was born October 6th. Well, I'm not going to venture to say a birth date for you, or anyone for that matter, who doesn't have one. But that's interesting. That's interesting. You want a reading, Jazzy? Do you want tarot or do you want astrology? And if you want tarot, please give me a just a little question. Otherwise, I'll just do general. General. The General. General Oliver North. General Mad Dog Mattis. What kind of question do you have, sweetheart? Oops. Do you even have a question? Thank you, Jazzy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you. I know I'm like so crazy about money right now, and I really greatly appreciate like all the support. I really do. And tell your friends, like the stream, right? Subscribe to my channel. Become a member. Yeah. Become a member. When will Aries break no contact? I assume that you're going no contact with an ex-partner. That you're going no contact with an ex-partner. Is that the case? When will Aries break no? And see, I don't get a very good time frame with this sort of thing. So that may be good for astrology. I'll pull a couple cards for you, but then we should look at your chart. So you went no contact with someone. Okay. Okay, so okay, there's this, that, and this. It's like that and like this and like that. It's like this and like that and like this. Okay. So the first card I got here, where you are now, this is the Five of Pentacles, and usually it means an unfortunate financial situation. It sometimes means a loss of money, or it can mean needing to be frugal, needing to tighten your belt. I don't remember what your rising sign is, but if you're Leo or Aquarius rising, then this makes really good sense. Leo and Aquarius rising especially. But this doesn't say necessarily anything about no contact or whatever. Maybe it feels like you're not valued. Maybe it feels like your material situation is suffering right now from whatever this is. Now the problem coming up, gosh, all these material things. The problem is the Ten of Pentacles, which is success. So I don't know if the problem for this other person was related to money or success in some way. Maybe you got successful and they got left behind, or maybe they got successful and you got left behind, right? I don't know. I mean, this is the Ten of Cups. And, this is happiness. This is like a happy ending, right? This is, you know, um, a family, right? Or a home. Or, again, I always say the happy ending. Things don't ever end. But this is like a climaxing moment where it's like, oh, we just figured this out. Things are better again. So, I mean, it does look like it's probably going to happen. Virgo. So, I don't know. I mean, this looks like a material situation that is not pleasant. So, either A, someone was draining you, or you were draining someone else. Again, the problem has to do with the material situation. And it looks like a good material situation. That's the problem. I mean, this is sort of a weird reading. I don't know if any of this makes sense to you because I can't make sense of it necessarily. Or rather, I don't see how all these things fit together. But this outcome solution looks really good. It looks like being happy in a situation once again. So I don't know. Does any of that sound like relevant at all? Like it's all material stuff, at least for the most part, right? Frugality and loss, success and gain, right? Wealth, 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 and happiness, right? Resolution, reunion. Oh, we're back together again. So, I'll try and get clarification. When will So this is the Eight of Pentacles once again. Another material thing. I wonder what's up with this other person you went no contact with. Are they particularly financial, or is money a big thing to them? I don't know. Because this is all about working slowly on something. This is about slow and steady wins the race. It's about perseverance, right? Knowing what you have to do and taking the time to do it. So, Lover's card. I mean, whatever this is, it's going to move in a positive direction. So I don't know the backstory, of course. And I don't want to know. Oh, divorced? Well, I mean, financial stuff typically goes into divorce, But there's definitely material or financial undertones to whatever the situation is, I'll just pull one card. Oops, it came out for me. So the Ten of Wands. It's a difficult go. It's a slog. It's a slog. Right? So it's oftentimes a challenging endeavor, having to put a lot of effort into things and feeling like you're not going anywhere. It can feel like a loss of direction and a loss of movement. You see? It can feel like a loss of direction and a loss of movement. So whatever this is, it's going to take time and hard effort, but it looks like it all turns out pretty well. So I don't know what that means to you, Jazzy. My Jazzy. Where's your chart? Just really quick. So, you see, you have Saturn going through your 7th house right now, which is all about straining relationships. You see, or it can be deepening commitment. But then you also just had the lunar eclipse in there. So if there is some sort of reconciliation that happens, to me, it wouldn't happen till after February, but probably not really substantively until spring or summer of next year. You see, spring or summer of next year is more what I would guess for this, right? When Saturn leaves your seventh house. But also, I would look for some positive movement when Jupiter goes direct in February. Now, you have a night chart, which means Venus is your best planet, right? But your peak periods in zodiacal releasing would be all the mutable cross. And you have no squares, conjunctions, or oppositions on that. Your best planet and your worst planet are opposite each other in your zodiacal releasing stuff. Oh, you're single? Well, I expect that to get a lot better once you okay, that's what I was told. Yeah, I'd expect this to get a lot better like as you get into summer and everything of next year. But like I said, Jupiter rules your seventh house, and when Jupiter goes direct in February, you could see some positive stuff. Now I want to look at your zodiacal releasing really quickly. Like, I don't want to spend time on this too much. Let's see. What's your birth info? 11 25 69 69 1 and okay, love. Love, love, love. Capricorn. What's up with Capricorn? I mean, you're not in a peak period in level 2. Oh, I should probably turn this on. I should probably turn this on. There we go. Web browser. So, you'll notice here, though, that you're in a level 3 peak period for romance, right? Now, the issue with this is that you really don't have any benefics or malefics aspecting these things. So, you know, they'll qualitatively be a bit more neutral. You'll just notice a lot more stuff going on, right? So, Virgo. Here's the Pisces Virgo axis. See, no benefics or malefics. No benefics or malefics. And that only lasts till November anyway. 2026. Let's see if we see anything interesting in 2025. Because I want to know about, okay, so here we go, Pisces of 2025. Or sorry, May of 2025, right? Which is a Pisces period for you. You know, and that's a 7th house sort of thing for you too. So I would expect, once again, spring, summer of next year to see more positive movement on that front. You see? So sort of like what I was saying in conjunction with Saturn and the eclipses and all that anyway, right? You know, and on top of that, you know, the nodes are going into your 1st and 7th house. So all of next year is going to involve your relationship to yourself and partners. So this is very interesting stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and go now. I'm going to go ahead and go now because I'm hungry and I need to eat and I have another stream. I have another stream to go to after this. Yeah. A fun stream. A fun stream. At least it's fun for me and other people. So, anyway, I'll be back Friday though. Love you.